Good to see everybody today. Don, Addington, TJ, how are you guys doing today?
Doing
Very
well,
good.
thank you.
Good to
I'm
see you,
so glad
Tony.
to have you guys down. Don, it's great to have a tech executive, someone from Travelocity, quite a bit of experience across financial, digital strategy, software, AI. You've got this fantastic new product service that we're going to talk about. It's as TJ, as you were mentioning, based on your background in software, AI, robotics, supply chain. We had several of these conversations offline. You said there was this really interesting infrastructure that people have completely ignored as they go about trying to build out their warehouses and their automation. So I'm really looking forward to just kind of figuring out what is happening in the world of warehousing and supply chain. Again, so glad to have you guys down. You guys are in Texas, right? So you guys must be experiencing a little bit of an early spring, I would guess by now.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we're based out of both DFW and Austin, and the weather's usually pretty similar in both, but right now the weather's pretty good.
Yeah, we are just dying for spring to come. There's nothing worse going through the warehouses and you see your breath, you're shivering. So it's a great time to talk about what's happening in the space. TJ, when you and I first talked, you really kind of struck a chord with me, because you had you had worked on one of the largest launches of humanoid robotics. I believe it was the Apollo humanoid, and I realized at this point that you are really on the forefront of what's happening in warehousing. Can you tell us really just give us a high level overview of what you're seeing happening in supply chain and warehousing? Because this is where Don and his solution comes in. And I would love for you to kind of set the stage for what we're seeing now.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Appreciate you having me on today. And when I crossed paths with Tony, we started talking about, what is it about Cloud9? What's so unique? Why iPhones? Why vision-based applications on iPhones? And simply put, after having launched Apollo with Aptronic, top five global contender in the humanoid space, uh, you really see a lot of low-hanging fruit out there that is being underutilized. Of course, when you look at a humanoid robot, that looks like the future, and I can sit here and tell you that the future is coming a lot faster than most people think. But a lot of the technology that has enabled humanoid robots and other robotic applications are often found on smartphones, and in particular iPhones have many of these same technologies. You think about the sophisticated cameras, lenses, the edge compute capabilities, um, battery life, everything that is happening on that device in many people's pockets is kind of the foundation for a lot of these new robotic applications. And in fact, just like the iPhone store or the iTunes store, you can actually soon be able to leverage a similar app store on robotic applications. But today there's a bridge, and the bridge is that there are a lot of applications that human workers can use. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But yeah, that to me was what excited me about Cloud9 when I met Don years ago, and why we rejoined forces middle of last year, is really to get this low hanging fruit out, this tech that's on iPhones out into the workforce with current resources.
So, what was the impetus in your mind, Don? I mean, how did you come up with this concept? I mean, obviously, as an entrepreneur, you're probably always looking for that next great space, and this is a great space. But how is it that you find yourself at the center of this?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today as well. So, to answer your question, I think, there was as many entrepreneurial pursuits start, in terms of this way. We had a hunch or some instincts that what's traditionally known as computer vision was going to become increasingly important in this artificial intelligence era. When we really kicked the business off, we were sort of focused on engineering services around computer vision, but quickly after getting the opportunity to work on a major project with a cold storage company, a pretty big one, we realized that the greatest opportunity was really around evolving the software as opposed to hardware, a hardware focus, optical physics and so on, but really software and the ability to interpret information from imagery and video. And that's where the AI part came in. And then there's a second portion to that story of that pivot from that initial hardware engineering start was I actually sort of on a whim, a dare to myself, I reached out to Tim Cook just on an open email. And we had been thinking about on our team committing to really, as kind of Apple fan people, committing to the Apple iPhone as a hardware platform so that we could dedicate purely to software development and just build toward the Mac OS and iOS operating system on those devices. I reached out to Tim Cook and just explained to him in my email that what we were focused on in the supply chain, and in particular, and that we thought the iPhone in particular was just a great optical physics package to accomplish some of these computer vision, visual AI strategies. And didn't I sent it on a Thursday night? I didn't expect to ever hear anything. I just thought it would go off into the ether. 9:30 the next morning, I got an email from some mid-level product management and partner management people from Apple, who from that point on have engaged us in learning more about our product and just becoming great co-thinkers with us. And so it was a great way for us to kind of begin to see if we could get a clear amount of attention around what we're working on, but particularly with a really strong hardware platform like the Apple platform. So
I think it's really smart too that you went software, rather than hardware, because hardware can be a lot more expensive. It can become outdated pretty quickly. I think that was really wise. At this,
also, just a quick addition to that, Tony. It's also it's to a great extent it's been underinvested in the software side. A lot of focus on hardware and camera structures and setting up cameras, but
yeah, I think you're right. I think that's you're right. There's been a lot of investment in cameras. We're seeing that with Tesla. I'm no expert in vision, but clearly there was different choices. You could go, that way, or you can go LiDAR, and we've seen some challenges with that. So I feel like that's really wise. That is really kind of built in. So, TJ, in your work that you do really across industries, what do you think are just the biggest, most persistent pain points that you're finding that are happening in these kind of traditional settings? And why is that making them so, I guess, interested in what we have now, or what, advances that you guys are advancing? Why does that seem to resonate with them?
Yeah, I mean, across the industry, there are some major themes. Certainly, when we look at the labor dynamics, everybody knows the story there. Increasing shortages. I think we were some 10 million jobs short in both manufacturing and warehouse logistics in the U.S. last year. And that's just jobs short that couldn't be filled. I think a lot of people know these statistics, but that number is expected to grow into the millions in the 2030s. So, we've looked far and wide for ways to bridge the gap, largely looking at automation. In manufacturing settings, they certainly have access to a lot more automation and have deployed a lot more. However, in the warehouse, and by the way, still in manufacturing, there's a lot of islands of automation. So a lot of people are required to fill those, to bridge those islands of automation. In the warehouse environment, it's even more sparse in terms of where you find automation, just because the business models obviously are so different. Purely relying on that labor as contract labor to provide services in the warehouse space. And so I think we talk a lot about labor, we talk a lot about automation. A lot of times automation is centered around that traditional fixed automation that you see more in factory settings. And when groups try to bring that to a warehouse setting, it doesn't translate in terms of the cost or value delivered. And so you're left with groups trying to stand up costly fixed automation that requires a lot of integration, and then it just doesn't pencil on paper. So yeah, I think when you can deploy something on something as simple as an iPhone, that democratizes access to technology that wasn't possible before.
So I'm curious though, Don. So when you are able to introduce this again, this kind of, I call it a new old technology, because everyone's got this in their back pocket, right? And I think that was so fascinating about this is that you're really piggybacking on something that someone's created and that you can just adapt it to this environment. But one of the things that happens in warehouses is that it's not fixed, as you were saying, TJ. You don't have this fixed robotics because everything is moving. It's fluid. Um, are you finding that warehouse leaders are deciding that we can redesign, like, and are like changing workflows? This is the biggest question I have when we introduce new technology is how disruptive is it, to like existing processes?
Yeah, no, great question. I'd say it's a little bit of both. There's in some cases there's some stasis, just a natural inertia of existing processes kind of staying the way they are because it's hard to change. It's hard to manage change management. But at the same time, there's a desire and there's even some pressure to look at automation opportunities to drive productivity or to solve some of the labor shortage problems as well. Because if you can boost productivity, then you can solve some of your labor shortage problems. And boosting productivity, without necessarily overtime or other complexities of trying to jam too much work into a single work shift. So what we saw and what we see continuing is in the modern era of these smartphones, these are not the smartphones of 10 years ago. The amount of compute power, especially, obviously slightly biased to the Apple side here, but the amount of compute power on the 17 Pro is truly remarkable. And when you factor in the fact that part of our solutions we're increasingly moving more of the software stack into machine learning and AI. That's both interpreting image data from images, um, but also interpreting objects from images. And then a second layer, when all of that data is extracted and sort of populated into like this pile of data, starting to make sense of it with a large language model as another layer. And to be able to do that on a compute device that doesn't require you to be connected to a data center or to the internet, but have it as a truly an Internet of Things, an edge device around right there in your pocket. It's a tremendous opportunity to really uh, make the product more flexible and the use of the product more flexible, but adapted to the existing workflow rather than having to change the entire workflow.
Yeah, to me, and everyone is looking at photos right now of like what's happening because I've got all this kind of stuff layered in, so everyone can see right now exactly what you're talking about. And I could see where this is going to increase, your labor savings for sure, because you don't need as many people to go literally just find inventory. Like that's like the biggest problem I see is people don't know where things are. They lose inventory, and that's obviously very costly. But then, TJ, you look at all the errors that are happening in these old style. Even they're trying to be clever, but they're just eliminating errors. You've got all the real time inventory. I mean, this is just like such common sense. You would think everyone, would be wanting to kind of adopt this technology. It's fully traceable. What other, I guess, benefits are you seeing for those customers right now that are those early adopters?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Tony, to add to that, it's not even knowing current state of errors. I think even worse because you haven't really, most groups can't even tell us what the error rate is because they're not even tracking it. They might know when they get a big chargeback from a customer because something went out incorrectly, an order went out incorrectly, or was damaged perhaps. But that's just, I think, the tip of the iceberg in terms of someone like a Cloud9 coming in and revealing what that state is to them in terms of how many labels were read incorrectly, how many cycle counts were done incorrectly.
I,
Cycle
I
counts were
don't think
just
I would want to
updated.
be on the floor the day the data comes in. It was like, it's like, okay, you've asked us for more visibility. We're going to give you more visibility. Now don't shoot the messenger. It's like, okay, you're going to be shocked at first. And then, things are going to kind of normalize. And, cause look, I've seen the old way. I've seen how they do this. They're visually trying to see what's coming off of trucks and pallets and things like that. The problem is everything is boxed. So if you've got this vision capability, I would just think that would just be so incredible, especially when you get into automation. Because right now you might be thinking, okay, this is great. You might just be telling people where to move things. But if you start, layering this into your automation within your warehouse, now you're talking, or your supply chain, now you're talking about something completely different, right? You add this technology, and suddenly things are going right from, shipping or receiving, I should say, all the way to where it needs to go, and it's ready to go to be picked and back out. And we live in a world of speed. How many lost orders? I've heard the numbers are staggering, right? You go in, you want to buy something, e-com, right? And you're looking for like when it's going to be delivered. You're like, that's too long. I want this like today, tomorrow. And they'll drop off your site. There's something like billions of dollars just kind of lost in the shopping cart, right? This is like, you're really adding that value to to e-com. I would imagine here. Yes.
Yeah, where a big part of our focus is, I'd probably describe it as the middle part of the supply chain, although we're now starting to see a lot of traction back in the manufacturing side as well. Um, but a big part of the objective, of course, is to strengthen and benefit the accuracy of the information that is identifying a product that's moving through the supply chain, ultimately to the retail and last mile side, and therefore improving that error rate or reducing that error rate, further out on the e-commerce side as well, as a result of the improvements in the middle part of the supply chain.
I
So
see. Well, I might have gone a little too close to the customer, but I could just see it, trickling all the way down and just making such a big impact.
yeah,
When you
absolutely.
guys, I mean, as the commercialization officer, TJ, you're obviously always looking for, partners and affiliates. Where are the best places for us to go? Which industries right now do you find are most willing, or they're kind of ripe for you? Like this is like an ideal setting for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, certainly on the manufacturing side, we talked a little bit about, but on the warehouse side, the key is to just remember two things. It's wherever there's significant complexity in the amount of items being handled. That could be hundreds or thousands of suppliers on the manufacturing side, or it could also be hundreds or thousands of shippers, suppliers as well on the warehouse side. So, and then of course, if you open that up on an international basis, there's just different standards of how things get labeled, marked. And so you just introduce tons of complexity into a warehouse, kind of the meeting of all things, where all things merge, right? And so you've got kind of a chaotic situation, and training people to understand how to read different uh, data that comes on the outside of it. And we all think as consumers that everything's barcoded. Well, the reality is, okay, sure, there might be a barcode on there, but there could be 6 or 7 labels with different barcodes and alphanumeric information, and different ship dates, manufacturing dates, et cetera. I mean, the list goes on. It's dozens of pieces of information that now you expect a warehouse associate to be able to understand and know what to scan, what not to scan, what to relabel, what not to relabel. It becomes quite complex. I think as we sit here as consumers and that item shows up at our door with a click of a button, it's easy to assume that was a seamless process. But the reality is there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that requires a lot of just training and tribal knowledge of processes, and ultimately a lot less gets left on the shoulders of a warehouse associate to kind of sort through and sift through. or manufacturing, inbound receiver of a inventory at manufacturing setting.
And just to add a quick item to that, Tony, on top of all that, the information accuracy and really turning complexity and tribal knowledge into a structured process. In addition to all of that needing to happen in a smooth way, it also needs to happen in a fast cycle time way, and that's a big part of what we also focus on, because we want customers to feel confident that not only are they improving the process and the workflow and making it more stable and accurate, but they're also able to do that without adding cycle time to their processes, but rather ideally either equaling the cycle time or even reducing it. And that's a big part of both our current mission as well as watching our product evolve. And we may talk about that a little bit later from a vision standpoint, watching our product, the software evolve in different form factors of cameras and systems like that, like wearables. So.
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, wearables are big. Well, the thing you touched on there, TJ, was just the idea of trying to train people in the warehouse. So that probably will trigger people because no one wants to train people. They're too busy. And particularly when you talk about warehouse, you can have a high level of turnover. And so you're already talking about a chaotic, a very hectic environment. And now you've got new people coming, and now you got to take your time. You just talked about, Don, not adding time, cycle time. When you have to stop what you're doing and train people just to do the very basic things to keep everything moving, you just feel like you're just throwing water into a leaky bucket. It can be very demoralizing. I love the idea that you've got an app because, we haven't talked about this, but I would venture a guess that you might even have some training on that app. You open up that app. If not, there you go. It's a free idea. You open up the app, and it's going to show. It kind of maybe helps with that learning and that development. That just takes even more pressure off of wherever this is inside the 3PL or the manufacturer or even closer downstream. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. Often what you find as well is really the app configuration for a specific customer. It's designed with the customer driving the workflow and the rule set. For example, like this is a required field here. This one is not required. It's optional. Having that built in. What happens is as soon as you get someone starting to use the app, then what they're doing is they can run cycles of examples without impacting real inventory accounting and do their training with the actual workflow. Like when people say, I'm an experiential learner, it's essentially the same concept. You're training them in the actual workflow, and it's that intuitive. And part of the reason it's more intuitive is because it's in the context of a smartphone application that people are already predisposed to know sort of
exactly
work.
Exactly. There's a big component of automation. You've got that human machine interface, the HMIs, and some people get kind of confused by that. But everyone already knows how to open up your app and kind of move through it. So you've really taken away a lot of the barriers to learning. You take away the fear, I think, when you have something that's kind of a familiar kind of device that you're using. I want us to look ahead a little bit because you guys you're in a space where things are changing pretty quickly. And I think you've both kind of touched on, maybe what the future might look like. Given your background, TJ, with helping launch one of the fastest and largest humanoid scale-ups, what can we expect, in the future with it? Because you said it's happening, it's coming quicker than you might think. A lot of questions come into people's mind, right? I know this is kind of a wide open, big softball question, so I don't want to steer it in any particular way because I don't really know what you know. So just, what do you see coming?
Yeah, I think it's the world of the buzzword is physical AI. So it's the largest opportunity for AI today. Obviously, it started with chat and language. This language is turning into physical action. So more pointedly, what I think is happening is for operators of, say, warehouses and manufacturing, you previously had to rely completely on manual processes, people, human labor. You're seeing that in some instances, you can actually locate facilities outside of labor hubs. Now, obviously, you still need people there. This is not a lights out operation, but there you can envision a world one day where there is close to a lights out operation, and your workforce can be spread out. You have a younger workforce entering that is tech savvy and eager to use technology in their jobs. They would much more readily sit in front of their computer and monitor or supervise an AI application or a robot. And we're already seeing this in other applications such as autonomous forklifts, where someone could sit somewhere else in the world even and supervise several autonomous forklifts and just intervene when it needs help. Same thing with an AI application on a phone that can read inventory. There could be someone supervising in another location that only intervenes when there's an issue in the computer program needs assistance. But for the rest of the time, it just runs automatically. So I guess I'm getting at a point in the world where you're getting, man plus machine is very powerful. It's not man versus machine. And so we're going to enter this world of just force multipliers through applications like this and then future robotic applications.
Yeah, I like what you said though about the younger workforce, because they're going to have a choice as to where they want to work. And we keep hearing about the fact that when more robots come in or there's more robotics, Elon has said this quite a bit, that there's going to be, incredible wealth. I know you didn't go there. That's kind of a hard concept for people to wrap their heads around. Like, how is that going to translate? So I think we're still a little ways off from that. So if they're looking across a field of places where they can work, and you've got an organization that is so far behind the curve, and they realize that the things are changing so fast around them, they really need to be learning tech. They need to be learning something that is a transferable skill set. And I think when you talk about that physical AI, that kind of human interface component, I think those are the jobs that are very practical, and I think we're going to be very attractive, especially if you can combine a little mechanical with it. Like, you go to a trade school and you might learn some mechanical repair, right? You might have a combination of learning how to run, an AI agent. You're developing agents, running agents, deploying agents, and then you might even have some hands-on ability to go out and do some light repair, right, to keep it going. To me, that would be a much more interesting kind of career path for people, and I think that's a great future that you're pointing to.
Yeah,
Don, what would you add to that?
yeah, I second what you're saying, Tony, and also what I would add is I think my view of how the workers roll, especially in warehouse operations or adjacencies to warehouse operations on the manufacturing shop floor. I think the word technician, loosely used, you can really become a bit more like a technician, almost a hybrid, in a role where maybe you've even started, entry level, you're new to the workforce, and maybe your job feels a little bit monotonous in today's age in terms of like repetitive activities and so on. But what's coming, and it's starting in some cases, but it's still coming, and that is the pivot from those repetitive activities actually having technology associated with making those repetitive activities requiring less human intervention, and therefore the human is not eliminated. The human can actually be a part of making the technology work better, and that's why I use the word technician, because you don't have to know necessarily how to repair an iPhone if a chip, gets fried or a battery dies. But rather, a technician is you become so good at understanding how the workflow works, and you start offering improvements that are in turn contributing to further improvement in the cycle time without necessarily having to introduce new automation. That turns you into both a worker and a slight technician or an idea creator. And anyone that is able to infuse creativity into their job on their own, it makes the job a heck of a lot more fun. It certainly makes the time go faster. And I think
Oh, and
that
it makes them more valuable, Don,
it makes them more
because
valuable. Absolutely.
you look at a lot of different leadership styles that are out there, and I think some of the best leadership styles, when you have some top down structure
Mhm.
that gives people a focus, like this is where we're headed. We
Mhm.
want you to focus on that, but then you get the bottom up with the analysis. We're working every day. We're going to have insights, and when those kind of meet together, then you can make those changes. People feel heard rather than just keep moving things down this automation line. That's why you're going to get turnover. That's why you get injuries. It's monotonous. People fall asleep mentally. They're not as sharp.
Yeah,
So I really like what you said there. I really
I've
feel
seen
like that is a
I've seen this in action, Tony, as well. And
yeah.
just give you a small example.
Please.
I've spent a lot of time on warehouse floors, and I have made it a point. I've got a little bit of gray hair, a little bit of experience. I make it a point to also not just show up and not only am I marketing our services and our products, but I really like talking to, especially these younger people who are newer in the workforce, who tend to have an interest in what we're doing because they're like, oh, this is kind of fun. I like what you're doing. Can you tell me more about it? Well, I get excited about that and then I try to encourage them to lean in on it, not be afraid of it, because ultimately it'll give them advantage in the process, but also it'll just make their job more fun. And they often have a lot to offer because they're 8 hours a day on the ground, seeing all the edge cases and all the unusual things that can happen with the tech, and their feedback is super valuable. And I've seen both. I've seen people that like decide to engage it and get excited about it, and they will just become more valuable. And other people who this is just a job, I'm not really that excited about it. Just tell me what you want me to do. I understand sometimes how jobs can be boring and things like that,
Yep.
but you really can kind of move the needle for yourself by leaning in and learning more about it. And learning is it's stimulating, you know.
I agree. And I've been preaching that here. I really have been preaching people, you've got to learn how to upskill yourself. There really is just no excuse not to do it anymore because if you haven't figured out that you can go to YouTube to figure out how to do anything, and if you get stuck in any situation, I've turned my AI assistants into my interns. I mean, I put them to work. I mean,
Yep.
there is, there's so much information out there. So it's really a great, honestly, vetting in a way, watching people either engage, respond, and want to move on, or you know what, these people aren't that engaged. We should look at kind of upgrading and kind of swapping them out.
Hmm.
As we kind of start wrapping up, I'm curious. You guys, I see you guys have some pilot programs. How far along are you in your deployment? Out into the workplace. Is that something you want to talk about? Like how far along you are?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. TJ, I'll go first, and then you add some color commentary. So, foundationally, I talked a little bit about kind of our early days of in an engineering services capacity. So we got some solid projects under our belt and a decent amount of revenue. Um, as we pivoted to this iPhone and this Apple Mac OS era, with our 99% software focus, we have built up a pretty solid base of foundational customers. They're all at the enterprise level. In particular, some things that more have been recently happening is customers more interested in going to the next step from the iPhone platform to using our same software to uh, still capture images, but with external non-Apple cameras that are fixed cameras and sending those to our Apple-based Mac OS hardware, and our software runs the same process that it runs on an iPhone. And my point for saying that is for like high speed scanning, where suddenly you've gone from someone having a device in their hand to actually boxes moving through conveyors. Sometimes you've seen these things in videos from UPS and FedEx, where they're taking a quick snapshot of a big shipping barcode. similar, except this is reading multiple labels off of the surface of boxes in about 2 seconds per box, and reading the data, both the barcodes, even if they're not properly encoded, as well as all the text on the surface of the boxes, translating that into specific inventory accounting fields and making that work. And that is one of our premier products that's now emerging. We also have other pilot customers, I'll let TJ talk a little bit more about that, that are engaging the iPhone stage. And just to give you a little more of a well-rounded look at our overall like form factor and how we deploy, Tony, we go from the iPhone, and some customers will stay on the iPhone, but others will transition to faster cycle time implementations where there's fixed cameras. So.
Yeah, no, Don, I think to tie a bow on that, the latest kind of expansion of a pilot is with a manufacturer who is trying to avoid inventory errors. Essentially, the case before we came in is they know where all their inventory is in terms of where it came into when it came into the building, but they have no clue where the inventory is on the shop floor. And if you think about a manufacturer, they're often running just-in-time inventory levels, and depending on what they're manufacturing, whether that be automobiles, appliances, et cetera, any line shutdown is unacceptable, and it costs easily into the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, as soon as that line goes down for a very short period of time. And so what we're able to do for that manufacturer is give them visibility to inventory movement on the shop floor and confirm that it gets dropped. The next stage is to confirm when it gets dropped at the line. So therefore, they can avoid line shutdowns, and even more importantly, they can reduce safety stocks and run even leaner inventory. So significant savings beyond just the labor component, which we focused on at the beginning.
I'll tell you, that is a nasty word, shutdown. No, that is not a word they want to hear. I mean, to your point, if you can prevent that, I mean, literally that's part of, that's really how we enter so many of our new customers, because if they've got the wrong staffing partner, they can cause chaos, right? Which could lead to a shutdown. And that's just that you just can't have it. Well, I tell you what, as I look across, my customer base, I just think, they do struggle with labor. They struggle with trying to attract people. Some of these environments could use a facelift. They could use a more technology to just stay more organized. And I think it does create for a better environment, a better working environment for the employees. So I'm kind of excited to see where this goes. I would love to see you guys keep expanding. We do a lot of work in the automotive space, and you talked about manufacturers. If you're an OEM, and you're putting together a product with thousands of parts, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect for something like that. So kudos to you guys. I'm really glad I got a chance to meet you both and learn more about Cloud9. What a great name. I mean, that's almost as good as Jobtopia. They kind of go together if you think about it. You're on Cloud9. You just landed your perfect job. Everything is perfect. Jobtopia. I mean, it's kind of like a marriage there, guys. I didn't even plan this.
Podcast part 2.
Love it.
Guys, great seeing y'all again today. I look forward
to see you, Tony.
I look forward to a part 2 here at some point to see how we're coming.
Would love to do that.
That's great. We'll see you guys again sometime soon here on the Jobtopia Cloud9. We're on Cloud9 here at Jobtopia.
Tony, thank you.
We'll see you guys soon.